We are now at the top of page 9 of the NEFAR suggested purchase and sale agreement. The completion of 17 is the rest of the blank lines for you to add additional things to the contract, such as this is conditioned on the buyer inheriting money, or seller agrees to repaint the master bathroom prior to closing, things like that. Paragraph 18 says all the agreements between buyer and seller have to be incorporated into this contract. Verbal doesn't count. Nothing verbal counts. When I was in law school, I had a law school professor say, I don't care if you have 12 nuns as witnesses, an oral contract to buy and sell real estate is not enforceable. And that's true of any agreements that may affect it as well. So it all has to be in writing. And we say in line 469, of course, this can be signed electronically and transmitted electronically and even by fax. That's a pretty standard paragraph there. Going to the next paragraph, there's something important that may have not jumped out at you. If you will look at line 477, it says, notice to a broker for a party shall be deemed notice to that party. Over and over in this contract, we say buyer gives notice to seller or seller gives notice to buyer. We really don't expect the buyer and seller to be communicating directly, but we expect it to go through their broker. And so it says notice to the broker is deemed notice to the party. And then it says any kind of repair agreements or warranties are deemed assigned at closing. Buyer, if there's any expense to that, such as a transfer fee to take over a WDO bond or a termite bond, then buyer, you pay it if you want it. Paragraph 19 says time is the essence. That means all time periods have to be strictly adhered to, other than force majeure. If we have an act of God, we've accounted for that. And also we say, again, as I had mentioned on a prior page, that if any time period other than the day of acceptance ends on a Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday, then we go to the next day. The federal holidays are the 10 that you expect them to be. There are no surprises. And it says all references to a date other than date of acceptance end at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You know, we've got buyers and sellers all over the world, so 7 p.m. Eastern Time is the cutoff time. In 20, we say that buyer and seller representing they've not entered into any other agreements with other brokers. That's important to you. And more important here, perhaps, in that paragraph is line 487. You should have been asking yourself, over and over this contract says broker, 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 and you're a licensee, not a broker. Well, we said it one time here. Broker, as used in this agreement, is deemed to include all the broker's licensees. 21 just says that if your brokerage likes to put the escrow deposits in an interest-bearing account, you can do that. 22 says we'll need social security numbers at closing for the buyer and seller. Understand that some sellers, some little old man, little old lady seller may not know their social security number. We need it at the closing. Same for if the seller's a trust, we need the trust tax number, which sometimes is the social security number of the grantor of the trust, and sometimes it's a separate tax number. Paragraph 23 is not used much. 1031 is in the section of the IRS code that allows a seller of investment property to delay paying taxes on the gain by buying other investment property. It can't be used for the primary residence. 24 is a neat little paragraph that I could send to a lender if they say they need the seller's permission before they'll give me a payoff letter or a mortgage or a homeowner estoppel letter. I can send them this paragraph and the last signature page. 25 is more important. FIRPTA stands for the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. Back in 1996, Uncle Sam decided that we didn't want our favorite foreign owners to sell their properties, take all their profits back, and not pay any taxes. While we love our German and Canadian and Argentinian and Brazilian buyers, when they sell and make a profit, they need to pay their income tax. So the law puts the burden on the buyer to withhold between 10 and 15% of the seller's gross selling amount, not their net proceeds. And if you've got a foreign seller, then you need to get them to a CPA or tax attorney immediately to do the paperwork. And you need to tell the settlement agent, closing attorney right away if any seller, the husband, wife, anybody, is not a U.S. citizen. Now, luckily, there are a couple of exceptions. If all the sellers are U.S. citizens or have green cards, then they're not considered foreign for this law. And even if the seller is foreign, if the price is under $300,000 and it's going to be the buyer's primary residence, then the seller doesn't have to withhold. Time of acceptance is in paragraph 26. Obviously, when the buyer makes an offer, they want the seller to have a certain amount of time to say yes or no or counter. Be reasonable here, buyer's agents. Give the seller enough time to consider the offer. Don't give them just 3 or 4 hours. And make sure that the seller is even in town and reachable. Maybe they're on a cruise and not reachable. Maybe they're flying to Europe and it's a 12-hour flight. So be reasonable there. All right, we're now at the top of the last page 10 of the NEFAR suggested purchase and sale agreement. Paragraph 27 is new wording. Let's read it together. The date of acceptance of this agreement shall be the date on which this agreement is last executed by buyer and seller. Now come the new words. And a fully executed copy has been delivered to buyer and seller. Before it just said that notice that has been accepted has been sent to the buyer and seller. But now we're clarifying that a physical copy of this contract has been sent to the party, that both parties have it. So whether it's an offer and counteroffer or offer and acceptance, you have to scan in the contract or fax it or deliver it to make it a valid contract. And then in 513, please don't ever try to dissuade anybody from having their own lawyer look over the contract. That really takes a lot of burden off of your shoulders if the buyer or seller have their own contract, their own attorney. 514 is brand new, and it's a sad reality that there's some criminals out there hacking into your email accounts. What they're doing is they're hacking into your accounts and they're laying low. They're monitoring that you have a closing transaction going on. They're seeing how you speak to the buyer in your emails. And then pretending to be you on the day before closing, they now have seen the closing statement because they've hacked into your account, and pretending to be you, they write an email to your buyer using language like you would, saying, here's how much you need for the closing and here's where you wire the money. And you're going to wire it to a scammer's account. This has happened several times right here in Northeast Florida to the tune of many thousands of dollars lost. You should always tell anybody wiring, the buyer or even the seller, before they wire money, they need to pick up the phone and speak to the recipient of the wire and make sure they're really talking to the recipient, kind of feel them out, and ask, are these really your wire instructions? Is this the right routing number and account number? So let's read this together. It is so important. Criminals are hacking email accounts of real estate agents, title companies, settlement attorneys, and others, resulting in fraudulent wire instructions being used to divert funds to the account of the criminal. The emails look legitimate, but they are not. Buyer and seller advise not to wire any funds without personally speaking with the intended recipient of the wire to confirm the routing number and the account number. Buyer and seller should not send personal information such as social security numbers, bank account numbers, and credit card numbers except through secured email or personal delivery to the intended recipient. And then, of course, we've got the signature lines, 521 through 528. And then look at 529. One more time, we're trying to ask you, is any seller not a U.S. citizen? Because if you show up to closing and we find out a seller is not a U.S. citizen, it won't close that day because there's paperwork to be done with IRS. And then we come to the receipt language. You know, the title of this document is not just purchase and sale agreement, it's purchase and sale agreement and deposit receipt. So way back at the end, line 530, you put in how much money the binder was, whether you got it by cash or check, and then you write your company and you sign it. And your title can be broker, broker associate, licensee, realtor. Any of those words are sufficient. Then we're unique in the world, to my knowledge, saying end of purchase and sale agreement, and then we have stuff. Well, what we have is information to let you guys communicate with each other a lot easier. We want to know the names of the brokers, and we ask for your license numbers and your broker's numbers. Why do we do that? Because CFPB requires that information to be on page 5 of the closing disclosure. So if we can get the information to the lender quicker, the better we have, the shorter the delays. If you mess it up, it doesn't affect the purchase and sale agreement because it's after the purchase and sale agreement. If you don't fill it in, or you neglect to fill it in, or you get it wrong, it does not affect the validity of the contract.